helped not only for you to record to generate some relationships with each other, but for you to hold each other accountable. And that first screen, and I think you can see my screen, is really the belief that we operate from, where it's the accountability of your success is not an optional entity. So that statement there below, the numbers you are currently producing are reflective of your levels of understanding on your industry, your marketplace, and your business. Well, it might be firm and it might be a little bit fierce to say, is generally indicative of our belief system. And that if you want to grow, there is no one more in control of your growth than yourself. And while we can certainly help enhance your growth, it really does come down to the level of engagement that you operate with, the level of engagement that you give our representatives, how to heart you take our growth recommendations and our suggestions. And we can give you a pretty proven effective recipe. We've done this a lot. We've been doing it for 30 some years. There's a lot of evidence that we've accumulated that we have a recipe that is impossible to refute. And we're going to go through some of those things today. And this is generally so that you guys can stay on pace, can ask any questions at any time, and please feel free to do so. I don't know if the questions are going to come into me directly as they come in, but I will certainly address them at the end. I'm going to try and keep this to about an hour. And after the hour, we should have a good 15, 20, 30 minutes to go over any questions should they exist. So with that being said, I'm going to begin the PowerPoint. And let's see here. All right, good. So these are the topics we're going to discuss today. The current state of your marketplace, our recommendations, particularly regarding your marketing aggression, frequency, volume, circulation, intervals, all that good stuff. What your consumers want from you. And again, the data that we have, it's not intended to portray negatively upon your industry, but it generally will portray that they want things from you that you probably wouldn't want from yourself. And we'll get into more details. But the mindset and the wants and the awarenesses of the consumer is really the whole purpose of this webinar, to keep you aware of them, make sure that they're out in front of you and that you can correct them. And then obviously the opportunities related to that growth is why you hire a company like us. So it's our job to present to you any impediments that you may currently facing. It's also our job to present to you the solutions to those problems and to those obstacles, which every practice faces. And then it can't be a Chris Ad webinar without some mention of hygiene as an always growing referral, revenue, and restorative source. So what do patient consumers know about and want from you and your industry? And then I threw in a little hint at the bottom. They do seem to be uncertain, fairly neurotic, distrustful, only mildly appreciative, and majorly concerned with money. And below is a slide of what we think their thought process is. So this is conducted after annualized research and tons of little focus groups that we do in an attempt to isolate the needs and wants of your patients. And it has become very apparent to us that they're distrustful, disloyal, susceptible to insurance pandering, and are apparently looking for reasons not to love you. So what that means is if you give them a reason to reconsider their decision, they will gladly take it from you. Some of the questions that we will ask them, and therefore the ones we're going to share with you, pertain to what they deem as most important when they choose a prospective or stay with an existing dental practice. This is a question that we've asked for many, many years. And this is a question that in the last survey we conducted, which was last fall, I believe 2014, out of roughly 1,600 people asked, what type of dental insurance do you have? We asked this question because this is the most important criteria to patients not only last year, but in the 2 years subsequent to that. What type of dental insurance do you have? I want you to pay attention to the slide. And I want you to particularly pay attention to the top of the slide where roughly only half of them could answer this question. Now, the reason I'm showing you this first is because this is the question that the majority of your patients are going to ask your practices. This is the first thing out of the mouths of the majority of the patients that we record calls on, first thing out of the mouths of the majority of our secret shopper calls. Only half the people we interviewed could identify what type of dental insurance they had. And that would be determining whether it's a PPO, an HMO, a DMO, a DMSO, or some other type of plan. What also became apparent is on top of the half of the people that skipped it, another 36% said, I really don't know what I have. So in the grand scheme of things, you're roughly looking at 30% of people that can properly identify the type of insurance that they're operating with. Now, what I want you to pay attention to is the difference between what they're thinking, because they're going to ask you about insurance 100% of the time, and what they know. So they don't know what they're asking you is generally the point of this slide. They're asking you a question that's on the bottom of their insurance, their sign-up forms, really. They're just following the guidelines. They're following instructions. Now, if you go below to the next slide, still correlative to insurance, what is your annual out-of-pocket maximum for dental? Obviously, the same people skipped this that skipped the other one. Half the people didn't know the question, therefore they didn't answer it. And half of the people that did answer it admitted that they didn't know. So you're looking at roughly 25% of the people that we asked what's your annual out-of-pocket maximum for dental could answer it. And who knows if they're even correct in this regard. Again, we asked this question because we need you and your teams to be aware of the sensitivities that you're dealing with, and not to be mean to your consumers and patients, but the relative ignorance you're dealing with out of the dental consumer marketplace. They know what they know, you know what you know, and there's a big disparity that exists between the two. To continue on, what do you expect to pay for a dental cleaning? 55% said nothing. And 6% said, I don't know. And the rest of them came up with an answer. Now, the reason this is important to you is because this falls right in line with our growth strategy regarding what is the patient responsible for out-of-pocket wise when they come into the hygiene chair in particular. Now, the reason 55% said nothing is because your insurance companies have convinced them in the language they use that these things are free, that they are complimentary services, that they are devalued, and there's very little value attached to them beyond what insurance will cover. If you've been a client for more than a couple of weeks, you know that our protocol on this is that you need to mitigate that disadvantage you commonly operate with. Some of you are in network, some of you are out of network, some of you are hybrids. But we have found very clearly that if there's any out-of-pocket cost incurred by your patients, that this causes a lot of reconsideration to occur in the minds and the eyes of those consumers. And since we are a retentive business model, we really only gauge them, and by them I mean your patients, by if they come back again. That is when we count them as a patient. It becomes very apparent to us that we need to be aware of what's being sent by your insurance companies, what's being said by your insurance companies, and how your practices are interacting with your patients regarding the insurance. So this is why they think it's free. Do you know what UCR means? Now, I think you probably know what UCR means if you're attending this webinar because you're in the dental business. But 95% of your patients said they did not know what it means. Now, UCR it's a term invented by the insurance companies that benefits the insurance companies because they convey to your patients that it's covered at 100% of UCR. That is why more than half of your patients think things are free. They are also a lot better at communicating with your patients than you generally are. So they are in constant contact with your patients. You see them roughly 2 times a year if you're lucky. They will bombard them with information and literature and explanation of benefits and recommendations that they go out of network or they go in network if the costs are cheaper. It really does come down to cost. It comes down to utilization. So when 95% of people said they don't know what UCR is, but 60% of people said they think their cleanings are free, that indicates to us, again, that there's a big chasm that exists between what they think they know and what they actually know. Now, this is a very interesting slide to us. It's what was your last dental procedure? Now, again, I think it's relative for 2 reasons. One is 60% of the people had a teeth cleaning. That's their last dental procedure, and that's normal. You know, I think it's Delta Dental did a study that said 75% of all the claims that they received seeking reimbursement were for diagnostic and preventive reasons or services. So this falls in line with it. The cleaning, the exam, the x-rays. But one thing I want you to pay attention to is the disparity between the amount of cleanings that are occurring and the disparity between the amount of exams. 60% of people said their last procedure was an exam or was a cleaning, but only 40% said it was an exam. Now, in our belief system, you should be doing exams on your patients, regardless of what interval they're in for their cleaning, or regardless of if they're SRP, if they're 3 month, 4 month, 6 month. They value that visit with you more than anything else. So you need to pop your head in there. You need to check in on the inflammation, the sensitivity, the kids, the dogs, all that good stuff that goes along with this visit. Because if they don't get a chance to see the doctor, and trust me, a lot of you guys do not do exams on all your hygiene patients. So it's important that if you're not currently doing this, you embrace this tomorrow. If they don't get to see you, that visit is devalued in their eyes. Now that's been proven for well over 5, 10, 15 years, however many years we've been doing this continual research. And this is something you guys need to pay attention to, because the whole purpose of getting people enrolled in hygiene is not to derive the value of the hygiene visit alone. It's to give them an opportunity for a diagnostic approach with you, for you to reiterate treatment, for you to diagnose treatment, for you to revisit unaccepted treatment. So the value to us is in the time you spend with your patient after the hygienist has cleaned their teeth. These are some more derivatives of largely their knowledge base. So stay with me as I go through a couple of these slides. And it's self-explanatory. They just said they knew what some services should cost. 60% of people said their cleaning should be free. Compare it to the percentage of people that know what these services cost, in this case, a crown. 50% said, I have no idea. 21% said a crown should cost more. 26% a crown should cost less. 6% said the same. Really what this means is only 21% knew the right answer. And again, we ask you, why does this matter? It matters that they know the right answer because this is what the purpose of the exam is in the hygiene chair. For you to revisit restorative needs, for you to readdress needs that they thought they could wait on, and for you to present treatment. So if they know what one thing costs, but they don't know what another thing costs, this is where we have always said there's a disparity in parity. Now, parity is that they think all services performed by the hygienist are generally the same. And that is a sad thing to admit, but it's true. And if you follow the logic, that's generally why, no matter what practice you go into and no matter what amount of interviews we conduct or focus groups that we do across this entire country, people are going to say the cleanings are free. And yet you guys charge a vast array of fees for different crowns across the country. Some are $1,900, some are $3,000 in Manhattan, some are $600 in Utah. So this is why you can't get a congruent answer out of this. Now, this is where they think the crown costs come in at. And again, same premise. They're all over the place. 50% said, I don't know how much it costs. 20% said 1,000 or more. And another 15% said, 200 to 600. You can see that it's all over. And that's largely a regional phenomena. It's also because on average, by the time you're 80, only 7 to 8 restorations, I think, have occurred in the average American's life. So the majority of the procedures that we get in your offices are preventive and are diagnostic. So if I live to be 84, which is my average lifespan as an American right now, I'm going to get a crown roughly every 10 years, according to the ADA. Those are not very good odds. Now this is more Chris Ad-like. Are your hours of operation conducive to your marketplace? You will hear us time and time again kind of reiterate this point, that there's some factors that are contributing to why your hours need to be what they are, and why you hear us harp upon certain times of the day that are important for new patient entry, for patient re-entry. And the reason that this slide is up there is because if any of you are still operating with the assumption that you can get by with one evening or one morning, and you're in any semblance of a competitive marketplace, then I want you to pay attention to some of these facts. And these are facts. That the average commute time in 2014 is 32 minutes each way in the United States. So according to the Bureau of Labor, 80% of your full-time employed workers work between 8 and 5. So if you're taking into account commute times, you're taking into account the times that they work with your schedule, you really have to start to evaluate how complementary is your schedule to the average employed patient's work schedule. 67% of families that are working are double income. So this is a vast difference from the 80s, the 90s when it was 50%. You have a lot more people now that are working, a lot more families pulling double income, and that puts a lot of strain on you. It puts a lot of strain on your hygiene departments, and it puts a lot of strain on your ability to accommodate that demand. Number four, it's important. And again, I think a lot of people kind of understand it because we hear about it, but they might not really understand the impact it's had. Is that almost every state that we visit, we hear that the jobs that have been recovered since the recession are generally lower paying jobs than their predecessors. Now, what that means is that people that are making less money are not going to be willing to take time out of their work schedule to come visit with you. And all you really need to do is look at your schedule, and it will show you everything you need to know about the voting trends of your community. And no matter what part of the country we visit, and I go to all of them, and no matter what part of the country our reps visit, there's very few, if any, of your practices that have equitable demand at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and 12 o'clock compared to the demand that we see at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and 6 o'clock. And that leads us to really start to evaluate how you're using your chairs, and we'll get into that in a little bit, and how you're using your marketing, and we're getting into that in a little bit too. But also what type of staffing you have at those hours is crucial, because just like in many other industries, it makes very little sense for you to have one hygienist at 4 o'clock and one hygienist at 11 o'clock if demand for the 4 o'clock hygiene appointment is triple the demand for the 11 o'clock hygiene appointment. So that requires a level of fluidity out of our practices, and the practices that do understand that and that do structure themselves accordingly are the practices that you hear about from us that are growing by 1 million or 2 million or 30% or 40% year over year over year. Yes, it's a combination of marketing and aggressive marketing, but it's also a combination of being available when you need to be available, being top of mind, which is one of our favorite sayings, and being a known entity in that community so that when a need does arise, that they know to think of you first, and they also know that you are available to take care of that need. So to continue with this slide before I move on to the other one, this is a slide out of, I think it was Solomon Smith or Citigroup or something like that, where I got this data from. But it's generally, it says less than 10% of Americans have more than $5,000 in their checking accounts at any time. Now, what that really means is that people are living paycheck to paycheck. And if they're living paycheck to paycheck and they're lucky enough to have insurance, this again puts pressure on your hours. Again, this slide is all about your hours. And it's about being able to accommodate the marketplace you reside within. And number 6 is pretty self-explanatory. If you are in network, you're catering to the working public. The working public are the people that have insurance. It makes very little sense to be in network but only be open 8 to 5 because you're only fulfilling one half of the criteria of the working public. So this is where, back to this slide real quick, are your hours of operation conducive to your market compared to, do you know what your dentist hours of operation are? Now, these are those same 1,600 and some people that we interviewed earlier about, did they know what type of insurance they had? And it doesn't appear that they're any more knowledge about your hours of operation. If you add up the ones that said, I don't know, with the ones that know, you're looking at almost 60% of people that do not know the hours of their dental practice. Now, the reason that we put this up here is because we do secret shopper calls on every one of your offices, and we do them multiple times. And one of the criteria we use is something called proactively or promotionally introducing your hours to your patients. And really what we want you to say, or we want your employees to say, are something along the lines of, you're going to love it here. We have hours from 7 to 7 and Saturdays too. Now, you have to stay within your own hours, but you announce your hours and you say what works best for you. What we commonly hear in your practices are very little promotion. And for whatever reason, they either don't want us to be aware of the hours, those hours are already spoken for with existing patients, which is a high probability, or they're trying to dissuade people from going into the before or after work or evening or weekend or whatever it may be. If I were in your shoes as the owner of your business, I can't encourage you enough to make mention of this and to train your teams to say it every single day to every single patient. And you have to understand that these are not just potential patients we're asking about on this slide. A lot of these patients have dentists and they don't know their hours. So if you're assuming your existing patients are aware of your hours and stay within the nuances of your schedule, you're grossly overestimating the interest level that your consumers have in your business. So this goes along with the previous slide. Do you know your hours? Nope, I don't know my hours. How many times have you been to the dentist? Now this gets to the heart of the matter in terms of how do you grow a dental practice. Because what I want you to look at is there's only 37% of people that have actually been to the dentist the recommended amount of time over the last 3 years. And not even 37% because some of them are going once a year. That means the other 63% are generally, oh no, they're 7 plus. Those are the guys on your perio programs. So roughly half of the marketplace is not going twice a year. They're not compliant with your recommendations. Heck, some of them probably don't even have a dentist. And I think we're going to get to that slide in a minute. Here we go. How many years have you been with your current dentist? So if you add up 2 to 5 years and 5 or more years, that's 60% of the patient base has been with you for more than 2 years. Now again, what that means is 40% of your patients are new to you and are somebody else's previously loyal patients. So again, we consider this, there's an absolute semblance of disloyalty in this industry now. Your patients are looking for reasons to leave you. And by reasons to leave you, I don't mean you're going to present them too much treatment, which is a big reason. And I don't mean singularly that you're not in network, which is another big reason. I mean they're looking for little disparities, little service subtleties and nuances. The phones aren't answered. The hours are not as good as I would like them to be. Nobody called me to follow up. When I canceled my appointment, nobody called me back. All of these are considered absolute managerial failures on your behalf. What day of the week is your cleaning appointment scheduled? Now, the reason I put this up there is not because I really care about what day of the week they're scheduled. The reason this is up here is because 1,000 out of 1,600 people skipped this question. And then another 18% of the people that answered it said, I really have no idea. That indicates to us they do not know when they are scheduled to come back. The minute they leave your office, they've generally forgotten the appointment time. And that leads into why your schedules are so awfully volatile every single day. And I can say with absolute certainty that when I look at your schedules in the future, many of you project out at 100% occupied. But as you come near to confirmation, as you start calling people or texting them or emailing them, you will oftentimes end up at 70 to 75% filled. And that happens in almost every practice we go to. And this is why, as we get into some of these latter slides, we're going to make a compelling argument for assisting your hygienist. We're going to make a compelling argument for overbooking some of your schedules. We're going to make a compelling argument for when you pre-appoint your patients to come back. Because based upon the current system that we're operating with, there's not a lot of people that know when they're supposed to come back or have paid attention to the times you've told them to come back into. What time of day is your next cleaning scheduled for? Again, you got to realize the same 1,000 people skipped this one too. So what day of the week is the cleaning appointment scheduled? I don't know. What time of day is it scheduled? I really don't know. But of the ones that do know, and there's 663 people that answered it, 80% said, well, I'm scheduled to come back between 8 and 5. Now, the next slides will reiterate this point, but if we revisit kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier, if all these factors are real phenomena, and 80% of the labor force is now working 8 to 5, and 70% of households are double income, and the jobs that they recovered after the recession pay less than they used to, why are we scheduling these guys to come in between 8 and 5? It just doesn't make any sense. I know, and again, I can tell you that my dad was a dentist, for those of you that don't know, and he practiced in the late 60s, 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And it was a much different marketplace then. I grew up in Detroit. His practice was in Detroit, and it was primarily the end of the day were the working guys, the beginning of the day were the shift work. We grew up in a car town. In the middle of the day were the mom and the kids. And now we still work with that practice. My dad sold it in 1993, but now I go in there in the middle of the day, And it's the 80-year-olds and the 90-year-olds that have been with the practice for all this time. And there's 12 empty chairs and 3 busy chairs. But if I were to go into that practice on a Saturday, they would have all 15 chairs spoken for. And they're realizing that, and you need to realize that, and hope you don't point the finger at us. We are not the bad guy in this equation. We are simply collecting the data that your patients and prospective patients have told us is most influential to them. We put that into your marketing pieces and we share that information with you. And it is your job to either do something with it or to ignore it. And hopefully the whole reason we're doing this webinar is that you do something with it. So that, again, the first slide, we can hold you accountable if you want to be held accountable. And we can hold you accountable if you want to engage with us. And this is a principle for growth in 2015. And I wish it wasn't so, but it just is. You have to have the hours that they want. You have to put them into hours that they want, and you have to put them into hours that you think they're going to stick to. Do you have an upcoming teeth cleaning appointment within the next 6 months? 40% said yes. 40%, that's horrible. I mean, I don't know if half the marketplace doesn't go to the dentist with any regularity, which is an old adage. I couldn't tell you. But I know that we put a lot of emphasis on our practices pre-appointing their patients at 90 to 95%. And I know that in the previous slides, there was a lot more than 40% of these people that said they had a dentist. So something doesn't line up here, you guys. And again, we consider pre-appointment to be just as important to the growth of your practice as new patient acquisition is. And it's very difficult for you to maybe see it through our lens, but new patients are extremely valuable. Don't get me wrong, but they're only valuable if they stay. And marketing guys, like we are, we know that your chances of selling treatment to them are greatly enhanced if they come back 2 and 3 times. It's not so good if they come in once. We have tons of studies to prove it. This is why you're going to continually hear us focus on retention, focus on monitoring the minutia of the practice, making sure that you are getting your people scheduled at 90, 95%, because at the end of the day, that's going to help you not only secure their commitment to move forward, but it's going to help our marketing work better if they can become a referral source for us. Now, what time would you prefer to have your teeth cleaned? If you remember previously, I think it was 80% of people said they were appointed to come in between 8 and 5. But according to this slide, there are only 15% of people that actually prefer to miss work, or maybe they're semi-retired or retired or shift work. Only 15% of the respondents said they want to miss work to come get their teeth cleaned. Yet 80% of the patients that remembered their appointment time were appointed to come in during those same hours, from 8 to 5. Again, this is the stuff that to us doesn't make sense, doesn't add up. And this is the stuff we're going to try and help you correct. But it is important that if we ask you for pre-appointment monitors and we have the ability to give you an analytic at the end of each week about how your hygienists are appointing your patients and where they're appointing your patients, and having a dialogue about what the employment, if they are employed, and where they work and how long the commute is. And this is probably just as important to put in your notes section as it is to document the name of their kids and if they play soccer and what the name of the dog is and if they like to go boating. You need to know where they work. And if you know where they work, then you can structure an appointment that's accommodating to them. And if you don't have those conversations, then you get what we're talking about here, which is an absolute disparity between when they say they want to come in and when you're making them come in. So it could come as no surprise and should come as no surprise that your schedules are as volatile as they are in 2015. So this is a follow-up really to what I just got done saying, but it's a saying that we've used for many, many years. In order to grow your practice, the words that are spoken and the actions that are taken by your practice staff are just as important as your ability to excel clinically. And we tell you this because we need you to have dialogues with your team. Despite the fact that we do secret shoppers on you, I don't know, 10, 12 times a year on average, we still need your team and yourself to have an open dialogue and communication about the impediments that your practice faces. We want them to become capacity seekers, but that means is we want them to instruct you when they're running into impediments. When they can't get somebody in, we need them to tell you. And then we need you to do something about it because this is the principal factor in the growth of your business. Us just telling you you have capacity issues doesn't solve the fact you have capacity issues. And when you have capacity issues, you are overly reliant on cancellations for your new patient growth and for your production growth. And we think it should be both. We think you should get new patients in at a pretty hectic clip. We think you should retain 70% of your new patients into cyclical care. We think you should pre-appoint 90% of your patients into their next hygiene visit. We think your hygienist should meet your emergency patients. There's all sorts of things that we think. But we need you to understand the reason behind it. And if you don't, just please ask. If there's anything that we've ever said that doesn't make any sense to you, it is your job to question us. And we have enough validity behind it, we have enough research behind it, and enough focus groups, and enough just anecdotal evidence that I think we can easily explain any issues you may have and get you to understand our point of view. So this goes with the previous slide. For every bit of research we have, there's generally an assumption that you guys are all qualified and capable, and that there's a clinical parity that exists amongst you. And we share this with you because that means you need to focus on other elements to separate yourself and to give you competitive advantages beyond simply being a great dentist. And I took out about 50 slides that would prove that the marketplace doesn't understand great dentistry, doesn't understand clinical superiority, doesn't understand the differentiation between your accreditations and the institutes, but I didn't want to bog you down with this stuff because I think you already know it. I think you understand that people generally can't say you're a great dentist because you do great crowns. That is generally up to your team to tell them. But they think you're a great dentist if you're nice. And this next slide, again, this is the same 1,700 people, the most commonly used words when they describe their dentists. And I took the ta-da out of the top. I just said, note the lack of clinical terms. And I'll leave this up for a minute because they're not all bad words. They use loved, they use nice, they use good, they use friendly, painless, dedicated, hardworking, caring. And then they also use some not so good words, but we don't need to focus on that. So I leave this here just because it's important to know that you're loved. It's important to know that they consider you to be nice and friendly and caring. But that is the extent of their knowledge regarding your business. And normally, those are the same words they would use to describe your front office staff, your hygienist, and your assistant. So they're using the same criteria to gauge all of you. It's not a clinical criteria. It's an anecdotal criteria. It's based upon affordability. It's based upon tone. It's based upon convenience. It's based upon your ability to listen to them. It's based upon your ability to give them treatment that is explanatory. It's not confusing, doesn't give them too many options. And that is something that we are working on with a lot of our practices because there's still a belief that I can overcome this stuff by being a better dentist. And I think there's a few of you that can probably do that. But I think that is a very slippery slope for the majority of people, not only listening to this webinar, but of our 1,600 clients. The ones that have tried tend to come back tail between their legs and say, well, now what do I need to do? So this slide is kind of a reiteration on the previous slide. And I put these up there just because we had a webinar, or I'm sorry, a seminar in Dallas. And this was a gentleman out of Oregon who came from the hospitality industry and was brand new into the dental industry. And these are the things, and I think I'm paraphrasing him a little bit, but these are the things that he brought that really resonated with me. And not only me, because we had about 200 people there. And the follow-up that we got was that this guy blew the doors off the room. And these were some of the things that he brought. Again, I don't think I need to elaborate on them too much. But an angry housekeeper, in his words, since he's from the hospitality department, is just as important to the success of the resort, which is your dental practice, as an award-winning 3-star Michelin chef. So you guys spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of energy going to continuing education. And conversely, very often you spend very little time, very little energy, and very little money training your team, your staff, to dedicate themselves with the same the same passion, really. And this is what we try to bring, is we want them to understand their relevance and their importance, and the beauty of this harmonious relationship that they have with you and how everything kind of fits together. But it really is up to you to start that process. And that second one that I have here, you must hire and train people with an understanding that industries change, is crucial moving forward. And this guy perfectly exemplified that. He had no dental background, and I mean zero. And within 1 year, this practice grew by $1 million after being stagnant for 5 consecutive years at $1.6 million, which is not a deficient practice, but it was stuck at the level of expertise that the people could bring to their business. And they were not forward thinkers, and they patted themselves on the back and they thought they did it good enough. And they were complimentary of their achievements. And he came in and said, you haven't done anything yet. Let's try this, let's try that. Let's do what these guys are asking us to do. And that bottom line is a quote from him. He said to all of our clients, 200 of them, do not be an obedient client to these guys. Test and validate all their recommendations. But he also said, if you do them correctly, your conclusions will mimic ours. So we would ask you to do the same thing. If you really want to test it, go ahead and test it. We're not feeding you a line here. Again, we got 1,600 clients, and I think we have a pretty good idea. Oh, sorry about that. On what it is that needs to happen in order to grow your practice. So these are our goals, and this is generally a goal no matter where we put you in this country. We want you to produce $600,000 per chair per year. Now, obviously, these criteria below will help explain in greater detail how you're going to get there. But yes, we want your chairs to work more than 30 hours a week for you single practitioners out there. You will hear us push you to get a provider and an associate time and time again, and it's for two reasons. One is because if you're producing 34 hours a week, it's not enough to justify your overhead. Two, we want you to train somebody to be as good of a dentist as you are. And that's important for you. And it's also very hard for you guys. So we do understand that it's hard to admit that somebody can do something better. It's hard to admit that you're dispensable clinically. But ultimately, that is your goal, is to teach somebody to do it as good as you can do it, so that you can have, in our vernacular, two shifts or two teams producing wonderful work, taking better care of their communities. Because if you're one guy and you've been one guy or one lady for 25 years, and you always get new patients in every month, it might not be the amount you want, but you're going to get 10, 20, 30 new patients in a month. There is an impossible statistic that says you cannot take care of those patients because you cannot deal with the compounding amount of patients that would require, how would I put this? You cannot deal with the compounding amount of patients that you should be, because you don't either have enough chairs, you don't have enough staff, or you haven't made the adjustments to your schedule to accommodate both new and existing. So one criteria we've used and will continue to use is the amount of hygiene that you're adding to your practice is really indicative of the percentage of patients you're retaining each year. So every practice on this webinar gets new patients. Some of you get 10, some 20, some 30, some 40, some 50. That's great. Personally, we think you need about 30 to 40, maybe 50 new patients a month per full-time doctor. But then you also need to compensate for the fact that 15% of your marketplace is going to leave you each year. Some are going to die, some are going to move, some are going to lose insurance, some are going to be offended with something you or one of the representatives of your office did. So if you have 1,000 patients, you're going to lose 15 or 150 to 200 of them each year. Some of you are going to lose 500 of them each year, depending on the way you interact with your patients. That is why companies like ours exist. That is why we exist and have existed for 36 years. We are a replenishment tool. We are also a tool that teaches you how to keep a higher percentage of those patients. These are some of the things that we want to focus on to help you keep them. Yes, multiple doctors. Yes, the chair is 60 hours a week. When I put lots of same day done carefully, that means that we are going to get into schedule and chair utilization in a little bit. But we love same day. We just don't want same day to interfere with the end of day when you're going to be dedicating your chairs to diagnostics. And if our reps have done their jobs, and I'll check with them, they have taught you that at the conclusion of your day and on the weekends, you are to dedicate your chairs solely to new patients and the reiterative diagnosis that goes into the recall patients. And that is it. There is not to be restorative columns unless you're 2 doctors. And then one doctor does a chair or 2 of restorative, and the other doctor does 4 to 6 chairs of diagnostics. The reason we do that is because each of you has a metric in your practice. Generally, your metric comes between $600 and $800 per patient. And that number is derived by dividing your production by the number of hygiene visits you have each month. So if you're between $600 and $800 per patient, then our job is to somehow increase the number of exposures you have to your hygiene department and your new patient numbers by 20, 30, 40, 50 a month. And sometimes you guys don't want to work 50 hours a week, which is weird. Sometimes you want to work just the 35 hours a week you're currently working. And that means we need to get creative with your chair utilization. So we will get into this. We call it lateral scheduling. We have a lot of clients doing it. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to ask for sample schedules. Feel free to speak to some of our clients. It's not a complicated theory. Largely, it just obliterates the divide between doctor chairs and hygiene chairs so that all chairs, all practice chairs are dedicated to new patients and all practice chairs are dedicated to hygiene patients from 4 till close and on weekends. And you can try it in the morning. There's just not as much success in the morning because a lot of you guys start at 7, which means a lot of your patients need to be out of there by 8 in order to get to work by 9. So here we go. How are we going to achieve those numbers? I put together a little map. I apologize if it's hard for you guys to see, but I'm going to reiterate them a little bit more. Here's your map. Number 1, plan for retention. Aggressively expand hygiene. I will talk to you a little until I'm blue in the face about this, but our wonderful analysts here just put together I don't know what I would call it. I guess I would call it a graph, but it's a graph that shows 3 correspondent numbers: number of hygiene, production, and new patient numbers. And it tracks their behavior over certain months, and it tracks the behavior of these numbers individually in your practices and also cumulatively as an organization in ours. These are absolutely like, they're like skis, is the best way I can put it. The skis, they're parallel. So as your hygiene numbers go up, your new patient numbers go up and your production goes up. And then you come down the hill. As your hygiene numbers go down, your new patient numbers come down and your production goes down. So we've always lived by the mantra that hygiene is the principal catalyst for the future of your practice and for the growth of your practice. And it also allows you to accommodate more new patients because a lot of your new patients choose to go into your hygiene department first. So if you're doing a phenomenal job at pre-appointing your patients, and a lot of you guys are probably saying, yeah, we do 90%, we do 95%. That's great. That means you have very little wiggle room left for new patients. So you always need to be actively and aggressively expanding your hygiene. Extend hours. I'm not going to beat the dead horse. Eliminate patient portion in the hygiene chair. This is something we should probably talk about a little bit, and I'm going to go through it kind of quick. But in our belief system, back to what I mentioned earlier, the patient already is under the assumption they don't have to pay for your cleanings. Your attempt to collect the patient portion, whether it be a deductible, whether it be a $20 out-of-pocket fee, it just simply causes them to reconsider their decision. And if they reconsider their decision, that means they're open and they're susceptible to the message that the insurance companies are sending, which is you're in the wrong place. So for, I don't know, maybe 8, 9, 10 years now, we have actively encouraged our clients to understand that to give up $20, $30, $40 is actually a tremendous savings over the couple of $100 you generally have to pay to go get a new patient. And if you keep a patient in the office, again, I can't reiterate this enough, a patient in your hygiene chair is a referral source for your marketing. The more patients you have in hygiene, the greater your marketing is going to work. So it's not a coincidence that guys that have 500, 600 hygiene appointments are seeing 80, 90, 100, 120 new patients. There are ratios on that too. Excuse me, guys. But that is extremely important for you to realize that needs to keep going up every single month. Number 4, aggressive marketing. Yes, it's self-serving. It's also the truth. I'm going to go through this stuff a little bit later, but there's a lot of evidence that some of our clients, and maybe some of you guys on this are guilty of it, and maybe some of you are not, but you cannot be timid in many of your marketplaces. You are commonly not in rural America. You are commonly not in areas that have 3,000 to 1 patient to dentist ratios. Many of our clients are actually in highly competitive marketplaces where it's 600, 700, 800 patients to one doctor. And mailing 2,500 a month, 5,000 a month, 7,500 a month, and having 20,000 households to rotate between, it just doesn't cut it anymore in a lot of these marketplaces. So, not to mention your new patient numbers and your existing patients are directly correlative to the amount of marketing that you do, since the majority of your marketing is not intended to just stimulate new patients. You're going after your existing guys. I hope you realize that, because your insurance companies are going after those guys. So when we say you need to be top of mind, it's with the assumption that your existing patients, your potential patients, your dormant patients all need to be receiving something from your office on a 30-day interval. And our fastest growing clients in the past have not attempted to, and I'm going to use this term, I hope it doesn't offend anybody, have not attempted to delicately pussyfoot around mailing to them at 30-day intervals. There's no such thing as too much marketing. I hope you realize that. And coming from a marketing company, you should doubt that. But there's no such thing as too many commercials. There's no such thing as too many direct mail pieces. There's no such thing as too many billboards. You need to be on their mind when they need your service. Assisted hygiene in the evenings and weekends. I think we went over that. But all that really means is there's a disparity for your services at the end of the day. Pre-appoint over 90% of your patients. Add providers. That's the biggest problem you guys are going to face. For whatever reason, I'd say 95% of our clients that don't have associates know they need them, yet they somehow come to the conclusion that they're too hard to find. There's not enough time to interview them. There's not good candidates. You really need to get this doubt out of your head. I mean, there's a boatload of candidates. There's a boatload of potential. There are recruiters and headhunters and all sorts of people that can help you with this. But you need to, again, take the initiative to do it, because we can't interview your associates. We can't place your associates. We can't determine the compatibility of your associates. What we can do is tell you when you need to add an associate. And we will commonly tell you that you need to add an associate based upon whether it's the new patient numbers, the number of hygiene checks you're doing, how backed out your schedule is, your restorative schedule. I would really encourage you not to ignore that. We're not just frivolously making the suggestion. It's based upon your own schedules and looking through your schedules and becoming acquainted with them. So when I say refine, and number 8, refine your treatment planning and monitor the results. Again, there are companies that can help you do this, or you can do it yourself, but a lot of you guys and ladies really have no idea how successful you are in terms of treatment presentation, treatment acceptance, and even worse, a lot of you don't know what the follow-up is in your offices. So when we ask who's following up with treatment, it's commonly everybody is the answer I get, which actually means nobody. So you need to assign somebody so that we can hold that person accountable, and that somebody can become refined in their job then, because if everybody does it, that means it's everybody's 9th thing to do on their daily list of responsibilities, which means they will occasionally get to it or they won't. And to us, it's too important of a criteria to not get to it every day. Number 9, self-explanatory. If you're referring things out, you have 2 options. Bring somebody in who can do the service you're referring out, or learn how to do the service you're referring out. Or if you really don't like to do that service, then yes, send it out to a specialist and it opens up your chair time for the services you do enjoy. But our premise has been you should not refer stuff out, and it's a very simple premise. There's no clear evidence that says patients do what you tell them to do. So they do not go to the specialist many times when you send them to the specialist, and because they didn't go to the specialist, they don't come back to you because they didn't follow through your recommendation. So there's an embarrassment factor that goes into it. Number 10, remove team members that work against your practice. That's simple. Here is a little bit when I talked about the 10 steps earlier. When you plan for retention, I need you to understand that when you're at 85% capacity in your hygiene chair, that means you need to add more. And that's not debatable. You need to add more. When you go back and look at yesterday, when you go back and look at last Thursday or last Friday, If those chairs have a person in them 85% of the time, you're really never going to exceed that because 15 to 20% of your schedule falls apart every single day. That's an indication to us statistically you need to plan for growth. Extend hours. Really all that means is stop arguing with the obvious. Eliminate patient portion. This is a saying we stole from one of our clients, but it's true. What's best for the patient is always best for the practice. Do right by them and they tend to stay in your practice. If they perceive you're doing wrong by them, they tend to go on Yelp and disparage you. Aggressive mailing, we touched upon that. And really, I'll just hit upon it one more time because it says this here, but decisions are often very spontaneous. So if you think that your delivery to them, no matter what form you're marketing in, whether it's direct mail or AdWords or something, if you're doing it too sporadically and you're trying to rely on them remembering you, they won't. I mean, the average images a person susceptible to a day is like 6,000 logos or something crazy like that. So again, I'm going to talk to each of you probably individually about it, but it is very important that you understand timing and luck and being top of mind. Assisted hygiene in the evenings, we touched upon it. Pre-appoint over 60% of your, or 90% of your patients, I'm sorry, we touched upon that. I put some hints in there, but really what that means is you don't ask your patients if or when they would like to come back. Your hygienists need to instruct the patient that I need to see you again in 6 months or 3 months or 4 months. And the reason is there's inflammation, swelling, sensitivity, redness that I need to keep my eye on in this area. And it's not an option. And I know you're going to get told that I don't know my schedule, and there's probably very few people in this room that know their schedule in 6 months. That is not a good excuse. That is not a legitimate excuse. Your job is to make sure they're compliant. Your job is to make sure that you give them a competitive advantage in coming back. You always pre-appoint your patients in the chair, always. When the bib is still on, they generally consider themselves patients. When they're up at the front, they generally want to get out of your office. And if they're employed, this goes back to what we talked about before, you don't ever pre-appoint patients that are working into times that require that they miss work. Ever. That is, if you ever want to see them again, you don't do that. If you don't want to see them, then put them back at 12 o'clock. Add providers, refine treatment, keep services. All right. So this is the coup de grace. If you make all these changes, you should have a growth trajectory similar to this, right? That's the anatomy of a cumulative hygiene growth opportunity. Now I put some notes here and only I can see them because they're in the presenter view, but it pretty much says in 20 years of working in this business, sadly, I have never ever seen a practice grow that rigidly. It doesn't happen. It can't happen. And the reason it can't happen is because 15 to 20% of your patients leave every year, regardless of what you do with them. Now, our job is to make sure that 25 to 30% of your patients don't leave every year. That's why you hire us. Our job is to give you marketing recommendations and provide you significant competitive advantages in the pursuit of that. But we cannot stop your patients from leaving. There's always going to be a percentage of them that do. So why don't practices grow? Well, I just told you. You have to document what your patients do and disregard what they say. And when I say patients are incapable of telling you what you need or want to hear, it's because we've never seen this letter in all of our years. We wish they did. I mean, we wish our own clients would give us this type of insight and foresight, but they generally don't. We have to monitor behavior and you have to monitor behavior too. So if you're concerned about the longevity of the patient relationship, if you're concerned about the conversion of a new patient into hygiene, really all you have to do is go back in time and look at their behavior. What did they do? This is why you cannot grow. And again, this is thanks to our friends over at Treatment 24/7, which is a treatment planning software that some of you may use, a lot of our clients do, but it says on average only 50% of the proposed treatment is accepted, scheduled, and paid for. And he monitors, I don't know how many practices, but it's probably a good 25, 30 practices that he shared data with. So when we ask practices what percentage of treatment is accepted, they commonly tell us 90, 95. Which is okay. I mean, I guess everybody's job is to overestimate, but truthfully, it's only half that are proposed, scheduled, and paid for. This reiterates again, most communities lose 8 to 10% of their population each year to death, relocation. And most practices lose 20% of their patient base each year just simply because of life. Life happens in every business. What we saw earlier on the slides is people are not compliant with recommended 3 and 6 month cyclical care intervals. Part of that is their condition to not be. Part of that is maybe they don't have insurance. Part of that is maybe they're emergency based. But don't be the part of that doesn't pre-appoint them. Don't make it any easier on them to not come back in than it already is. Practice managerial oversight. This is something we're going to address head on in the next couple of months, because we're going to begin using a data retrieval system that can go into your software and actually just get the data that we want rather than asking you to compile it and send it. Because what we're realizing is a lot of your managers and a lot of your staff members either don't know what the data is we're looking for, don't know how to interpret it, or don't want us to see it. So if we're really going to help you, we really need to get into, for lack of a better word, the bowels of your business. And the only way we can do that is to go in and retrieve exactly what we want, analyze it exactly the way it needs to be analyzed, without assumptions, without guesswork, without any of this stuff, and come up with a conclusion that will help you and us help you achieve your growth goals. Now, this is a little dig at the hygienist, but again, when we have monitored this and we have, 1,000 sheets, this kind of goes hand in hand with doctors saying that their treatment acceptance is 90%. Hygienists always tell me it's 95, 97, 99. But we have almost 1,000 practices that submit this data to us, and it's always less than 80. And I mean always. So, I know they're telling you one thing, and sometimes your statistics bear out another, but really all you guys need to do is go look into the future in your schedules, and go look in November, early November, go look in late October, and then compare it to the months that just passed by in April and early May, and see what it looks like. And then lastly, that's people. People are unreliable creatures. You have to kind of prepare for their unpredictability in advance. So this is what the gist of it is. Some of these elements are correctable, others are not. This is our job. We want to help you with those you can control. This is a company mantra. And for those of you waiting, there's only one more slide. So when I say I'm punctual, I wanted to keep it under an hour and then answer any questions you guys may have. But the whole purpose of doing these things, and we're going to keep doing them, and we're going to break you guys up not only by how new you are to our business, but the size of your business, the complexion of your practice. We can only succeed as a business if you succeed as our clients. So honestly, there's no more important thing to the continued success of ChrisAD than the growth of your practice, because if you grow, not only will you stay a client, you will refer your friends, you will refer your colleagues, you will speak fondly of us, but only if we fulfill our obligation to you first. So we will do whatever it takes to help you realize positive change and explosive growth, and there's no reason that any of you can't do that. And I'm looking at some of the names on this list. Some of you guys are absolute studs in terms of your production, but you're also flat in terms of your production. So there's only so much one man or one woman can do, and some of you are at that stage. So that means we gotta plan for something else now. The next step is here. The next chapter is here. So we will not stop until your growth goals are secured. What I put down here is something that I consider to be the most important facet of our business, which is, of the 1,600 clients we have, a lot of these practices have been with us for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, 18 years, 20 years. You guys, you're new to us, but I'm sure you're aware, you have no obligation to our company. You are voluntary. There is no mandatory annual contracts. That is not the way we choose to operate. We operate with a simple premise of, if you're happy, you'll stay. If you're happy, you'll stay 20 years. Obviously, our job is to keep you happy. So their loyalty is considered to be the strongest testimonial we could provide. That is something all of us in here believe. Last year, it seems that our clients had a pretty darn good year, because when you average everything together, we grew almost 15% on average. Some of you guys grew 200%, some of you grew 6%, and some of you may be flat. That's why you're on here. If you're flat, if you're 5%, if you're 7%, if you're 10%, it's not enough. just because inflation is getting you. Companies raise their fees on you, vendors raise their costs on you, marketing companies raise their costs on you, insurance decreased their reimbursements to you. So 10%, 6%, 7%, it really is a very hard way to do business nowadays. So what I would like you guys to realize is that you can call me at any time. You can call me directly. I realize my phone number is not up here. It's on a different PowerPoint. Oh, it is up there. Okay. That's direct line to me, 916-802-5757. You can use that at any time. I do live in the East Coast, so for you guys that are maybe listening in different time zones, just be gentle if you're going to call late at night or early morning. But I also travel quite a bit. So with that being said, I'm going to tune myself out. I'm going to go to the questions section and see if there are any. Okay. All right. All right. And here we go. Hey, Jeremy, can you hear me?
We can actually hear.
You can hear him?
No. Let's try it now.
Jeremy?
Yeah.
No? All right. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to, these are questions that are supposed to be coming in vocally, but I can't seemingly get to them. That's a bummer. Because there are questions coming in.
Type them in. Oh,
okay, so here's some typed in questions.
How do you handle a new patient with periodontal disease?
Well, I guess I'll answer this question, and I don't really know what regard you're asking it, but if you mean if they come into the office and they have full-blown... Oh, okay, it's the same question. Okay, how do you handle a new patient with periodontal disease in terms of their co-payments? I can tell you that our clients that... yeah, I mean... All right, a colleague of mine said, if I were the business owner, how would I handle it? Based upon what I know, I would apply the same principle that there's zero out of pocket, anything on the hygiene chair. And the reason you would do that is because the hygienist who gives the free cleanings is also performing the scaling and root planing. And their belief system has already been tainted enough that they think if the hygienist is doing it, it's free. And there's a lot of evidence, and you guys as an industry are going to not like the evidence, but again, when you're a company our size, you have a lot of resources. When you have a lot of resources, you compile a lot of data. So you get to see what happens to patients when they're diagnosed with periodontal disease in a dental practice, and you get to see how often they come in, if they stay on their maintenance programs, when do they fall out of the maintenance programs, and why do they fall out of the maintenance programs? And again, we were lucky enough to have a couple of clients undertake this. And what they did is they went into the scenario that I'm going to do this for you for nothing more than what insurance covers if you agree to promise me one thing. And that is that you're going to come in here in 6 weeks to start this program. And moving forward after that, you're going to make me a promise you're going to be in every 3 months after that. And if you can fulfill that obligation, then I will fulfill my obligation to take care of you. And the reason they do it is because no matter how much education and value they put on the service, they were still achieving less than 30% compliance with the maintenance programs. So in an effort to alter that variable, they changed one variable and one variable only, which was cost. They still described it in the same clarity they always had. They didn't diagnose it on any more people or any less people than they previously did. Their definition of perio was the same as it always had been, which is in that office was largely 5mm pockets and worse. Isolated did not really count. And what they found was that acceptance and compliance went from 30-some% to 90%.
And what happened with production?
Production went up 40%. I mean, there's again, if you guys want evidence, I mean, we can give you evidence. It's not a hard thing to give you. We have the exact date that they start policies and programs like this, and we have the results of these programs. Now, somebody,
Same question.
how is it legal not to charge the copay after insurance pays? They've always been taught that if you give any discount, you have to disclose it to insurance. Well, I guess that is one way to do it. We do have clients that do disclose it in the notes section. And then we also have clients that don't disclose it. So I mean, I guess the best answer I can give you is, in terms of legality, we have pushed this button And we have been on the forefront of this topic for probably 10 or 12 years. And there is not a single case of a client that we have yet to work with that has been hassled, reprimanded, hauled before a court, license revocation, any of this stuff. And despite making this a policy not only in their marketing, but a policy in their office. So to answer your question, how is it not legal? There's a gray area that exists in every law, and being a non-lawyer, I really cannot tell you where that gray area exists, but according to our lawyers, they cannot, and by they I mean your insurance companies cannot tell you what you have to collect and not collect. And I know the insurance company lawyers would probably tell you different, but we have yet to see it emerge as an actual issue. It does emerge as a threat. And the threat thus far has had no bite attached to it.
How many clients do we have writing off the co-payments for?
For Perio or for all?
Yeah.
To answer that question, how many clients do we have writing off I don't know. I don't keep track of it, but I would say 75 to 80% of our clients do not collect co-payments on basic preventive services, and probably 40 to 50% do not collect co-payments on periodontal services.
Nothing bad legal.
No. I mean, it's a large segment of the population, you guys. So again, I wish I could give you the answer you're looking for because I've had this question 10,000 times. But again, not being a lawyer, I can't completely alleviate your concerns. I can't do it. I mean, there's a lot of data out there that attempts to threaten you guys. I'm just telling you, my personal experience has been there is no repercussion. So the next question is, how do I handle HMOs with crappy fees? I guess I'll interpret that. Do you mean how do you process them if somebody with an HMO comes in?
Yeah.
If somebody with an HMO comes in and you don't take it, treat them just like gold, because it's too late. You've already built the loss into your schedule. So your alternative is to say, get the hell out of here, you guy with your crappy HMO. And they're either going to have a very negative experience or a very, very negative experience. So, so our belief has always been treat them well, give them a great experience. You've built the loss into your overhead already. You're paying your hygienist, you're paying your overhead. And the way that employers use insurance brokers now, just because I have an HMO this year does not mean I will have an HMO next year. And just because I have a crappy HMO does not mean that I only hang out with crappy HMO patients. And it does not mean that I will not be a positive referral for you. And it does not mean that I won't enroll in your in-office plan. It does not mean that you can't get me to come back. We have thousands of experience with it. But I think it's how you handle it. And if you kind of imply that, geez, you got a really crappy plan and you're not welcome here, well, they're going to leave and they're going to have a very sour taste in their mouth because of that. And again, I think you need to be very careful with the advent of sites like Yelp, these sites that people can go post negative experiences on. A lot of it's immediate therapy. They'll go on there, whether they're right or wrong, and they will complain about you and your policies, and it will have a very negative impact on your ability to acquire future business. Even though that's your policy, it doesn't make sense for that to be your policy. Okay, guys, next question. It says, I'm new to ChrisAD and will implement early and late hours with some weekends. I already have patients scheduled outside of these hours. You know what? I would say this goes back to when you ask somebody when their appointments are.
Read the whole question.
I can't. Do you suggest I reschedule these patients? Okay, this is when I would say, and I did this personally, and it worked very well. I was in Texas, and a gal we worked with changed her hours right then and there and said, okay, I'm done with it. I'm moving my hours. I'm going, I think it was like 1 to 8 or 12 to 7 or something like that. And all we instructed her to do was, as they started making their confirmation calls and sending out their texts, just change the hour of the appointment and say, instead of, hey, Corey, I'm looking forward to seeing you at 3 o'clock, say, hi, Corey, I can't wait to see you at 6 o'clock for your cleaning appointment. It goes back to that slide we showed you in the very beginning. The people do not remember and are not aware of the time they make their appointments. And if you can give them a better time, there's actually a greater probability they'll show up than the prior time you had them scheduled for. So no, I would not call them and say, is it okay if I change you? I would call them and say, I can't wait to see you at 6 o'clock. And just change them. Okay, next question. Can you explain a pre-appointment monitor? Yeah, very simply. A pre-appointment monitor is it's a data monitoring device that we have that we can send your teams so that they can fill it out and they send back to us at the conclusion of each day or the conclusion of each week. And then our analysts put together a graph on percentage of pre-appointed patients. Are they pre-appointed to come back for 3 month, 4 month, 6 month? Are they pre-appointed to come back before or after work hours? And it gives you kind of an accurate portrayal of what's going on in your office. The only downside is your hygienists have to fill it out. So it takes maybe, I don't know, 5 minutes each day to do so. But 5 minutes of time out of 3 hygienists is worth it, because if we can save one patient, you've already recouped significantly the cost that it took. So if you want one of those, I saw who asked the question. I can easily mail you one or email you one. I can do it right now. So we'll get you a sample, and then you can call me tomorrow if you have any questions, and I'll walk you through it. And then we'll get you on a monitor. Okay, next question is, if you treatment plan a patient for their immediate needs, when do you present a more comprehensive treatment plan needed? Well, it depends. We're not saying you don't present a comprehensive treatment plan. What we're saying is that you then prioritize the treatment plan to their immediate needs. So I don't think I'm recommending or advocating that you not introduce needed services, needed work, or recommended treatment. What I am advocating is that you give them segmentation, I guess is what we would call it. You have issues here. The good news is these issues are a little bit more pressing than these other ones. Beware, Corey, nothing in dentistry gets better with time, but these are the things that need to be addressed immediately. When we come back for your 6 month, we'll do a reevaluation on these teeth, but these are the next ones after we take care of this. So really what it comes down to is, if you propose more than $2,500 of treatment on a new patient, especially one that's not referred, there's a high probability they're not going to move forward with any of the treatment. So we've always asked our guys in phase 1 to try and keep it at $1,500, under $2,000 definitely, because you want to mitigate the amount of out-of-pocket they incur because they don't trust you yet. So again, this whole premise is, when do you introduce it? Maybe the second time through. Maybe you continue to reintroduce it. But we are soft sell by nature, because we're hygiene driven by nature, because we know what happens when you keep patients. And if you can keep patients, wonderful things will happen in your practice. And if you can't keep patients, you'll become our best client, because you'll need to mail 15, 20,000, 30,000 pieces a month, because you're constantly replenishing your patient base. And we have practices that do both. But to answer your question, I hope I answered that question for you, David. But it is you introduce the whole enchilada, but then you segment out the idea or the concept that there are 2 things or 3 things that need to be taken care of immediately. Looks like that's the conclusion. Yeah, okay, thanks. I don't see any more questions coming through, but I do want to thank you for your contributions, your questions, and your time, most of all. I appreciate you guys, many of you on the East Coast, sitting up with me until 8:20 to go over some of this stuff. I'm going to email each of you this PowerPoint tomorrow, just so you can sit down and maybe go through it with a different comb and see if there's anything that I need to elaborate on or any questions you may have. And other than that, I just want to wish you all a good night. I look forward to speaking with you all soon, and thanks for your time again.